Welcome to the Investor Coaching Show. Here's your host, Paul Winkler.
Hey, welcome to the Investor Coaching Show. I am Paul Winkler. Talking money and investing and trying to make sense of some things that just don't make sense. Okay, so you're probably somebody that goes to a workplace. I'm guessing many of you are. You go to a workplace where you have a 401k, 403b, 457 plan, some kind of retirement plan, and you're trying to choose the things that you have at your disposal. In the plan, you got a list of investments, and those list of investments are going to be things that may be familiar to you, maybe not familiar to you. Maybe the company name is familiar to you. Probably the company name is familiar to you. Some of the biggest companies out there do a ton of advertising on investing. And, you know, as I can imagine being in your shoes, you see advertisements, you hear names that you're familiar with, and it gives you a level of comfort, right? I mean, probably. And then when you're choosing your investments, you're going, well, I don't really know which one of these to choose, but I know that the company is well known. It's a big name. And thereby, you know, some of it's got to be okay. Maybe some things are better than others. I mean, let's face it. There's probably some things that they put out that aren't so great. Some things that they put out that are pretty good. And then you're listening to, how does the 401k work? Well, you know, in our 401k, let's say the person running the meeting says, we have 100% match up to your first 3% of your contribution and 50% match of the next 2%. So if you put 5%, we'll do 100 of the first 3, so that's 3%, and you'll do 50% of the next 2, so that's another 1%, and that's a total of 4%. I'm just sitting here using my fingers going, wait a minute, I got 2 hands going here. But anyway, so you're going to be selecting your investments, and you're going, okay, which funds do I use now? And the person running the meeting dutifully tells you that if you don't know which funds to choose, then just use the target date fund. You know, if it says target 2040, then you just put your money in that one and you're done with it. You don't have to select anything else. But you go, well, there are a lot of other funds to choose from. Well, some people like to have a little bit more control than that, so they want to put some money in these other funds. And you go, okay, well, that's not me. I'll just put it in the target date fund. And I'll see people come in our offices with 2 different target date funds. I go, well, you know, so I got a target 2030 fund here and I got a target 2050 fund. Well, that's 20 years difference between the retirement date. Which one is going to be your retirement date? I don't know. I was diversifying. Well, no, you know, what they're doing is they're managing the portfolio such that if you're going to retire in 2050, you're going to have more stocks on average, then you're going to have, well, I say on average, because I've seen some really weird target date funds that, you know, do things in a totally different manner. So I'll never speak in blanket terms anymore on this show because of that. Or if you're going to retire in 2030, then you're going to have a different allocation. Now, it'll probably be the same mutual funds, but just in different proportions. You'll have a little bit more in the bond area with the portfolio that is typically for the person retiring a little bit earlier. So you just go, well, I'm going to retire in 2030. So I think I will just put everything in the 2030 fund because that's what it's designed for, is somebody retiring in that particular year. I'll just do that. And then you go put your money in, and then you forget about it. You don't think about it. Every once in a while, maybe you look at the statements. Probably not. But, you know, you just go and put all that money in there, and then you just let it rip. Well, lo and behold, somebody like me that comes along and goes, you know what, I want you to think about this a little bit more. I want you to think a little bit more about what exactly you are doing. And you go, okay, so what do I need to think about? Well, let's say that we have a fund family like Fidelity, for example. And I'll use Fidelity because I pick on Vanguard all the time. I think I'll pick on Fidelity now. And I'll pick on American funds. So you go and buy a Target 2040 fund from Fidelity, first of all, and then you have different mutual funds, and you look at, oh, this is a mutual fund of mutual funds. So you can have 2 sets of expenses. You have the fund itself, and then you have the underlying funds. So You don't recognize that because you typically only look at the one management fee. You don't look at everything else. But nothing wrong with that. But I'm just saying that's what's going on. A lot of people don't recognize that's what's going on. So what I like to do with these types of funds is I look at an overlap. I look at, one of the rules of investing is to diversify, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Have your money spread out between lots of different things. So you go, well, this is certainly doing that. This mutual fund has a lot of mutual funds in it, so they're spreading the money out, aren't they? And I would say, well, yeah, maybe, but let's take a look. And what we do is we take the names of the mutual funds inside the target date fund and say, okay, well, they got the Fidelity Series Growth Company Fund in there. They got the Fidelity Series Blue Chip Growth Fund in there. They've got the All Sector Equity Fund and the Opportunistic Insights Fund in there. And they got the Large Cap Stock Fund. They got the Intrinsic Opportunities Fund. And they got this whole list of different funds in there. And, series value funds, so on and so forth. And you go, okay, so let's look at them. What are inside those mutual funds? Because those mutual funds hold stocks, right? Yes, they do. And what stocks do they hold? Well, I just named 6 mutual funds for you: Growth Company, Blue Chip, All Sector, Opportunistic, and Large Cap, and Intrinsic Opportunities Fund. And all 6 of those funds own Apple stock. So guess what happens if something happens where Apple stock goes down? All six of those funds are negatively affected by that. Then you got Microsoft. 6 of those funds own Microsoft stock. And then you got ExxonMobil. Had the large value, the Opportunistic Insights, Stock Selector Fund, Large Cap Value Fund, All Sector, Blue Chip, Intrinsic, and Growth. All of those mutual funds I just named. They're all separate mutual funds. All of them own ExxonMobil. And then you go, well, NVIDIA. Then you got 6 of the funds on that front. And I can go through page after page. Bank of America. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mutual funds own Bank of America stock. And what did we just hear problems with bank stocks, right? In general, I'm not talking about Bank of America in particular, but I'm saying in general, we were hearing problems with bank stocks and pretty big declines in bank stocks. And all those mutual funds own the same bank stocks. So if you look through, they have Amazon, Meta platforms, United Health Group, Wells Fargo's bank that just, they were in the news for all the wrong reasons recently. Go look it up. Then you got General Electric, and you got, so on and so forth. So what is happening here is you're breaking a fundamental rule of investing. You think I'm diversifying, and you go, well, wait a minute. No, I'm not diversifying. A lot of these mutual funds own those same exact stocks. Now, the other thing that you run into here is this. You'll have turnover in the fund. You hear me say that, watch turnover in your investment portfolio. If you have turnover of 50%, means 50% of the holdings are different from one year to the next. And you go, so Paul said, make sure you watch the turnover in the mutual fund. Well, the problem is you may look at the turnover of this target date fund and see that it's not tremendously high. But sometimes they are. It just boggles my mind how often you will see fairly high turnover rates in these things, because what they're turning over when you look at the target date fund turnover, you're looking at how often they turn over the funds inside of the fund. So if you got 50% turnover, that means 50% of the mutual funds are different from the year before. And, then you go, well, wait a minute, there's another step deeper, isn't there? And the answer to that would be yes, there is another step deeper. How much turnover is in the fund inside of the funds? And there you start to see that, like the All Sector Equity Fund has 46% turnover. Almost half the stocks are different from one year to the next. Blue Chip Fund, 48% turnover. Canada Fund wasn't too bad, it's 19%. Then you got the Emerging Markets Fund, 65% turnover, according to Morningstar, as of May of 2023. And you go, whoa, wait a minute, that's a lot of buying and selling going on. What was the return of the fund? And when you look at it, you'll typically only see like 3, 5, and 10-year track record. Let's go back a little further than that, shall we? And let's go back from September 2000 through May of 2023. September 2000, when the fund was opened, to May of 2023. The average annual return was a whopping 4.7%, less than 5%. And you go, well, if I looked at more recent performance, it would have looked better. I don't know what it was, but it was much higher than that. And that's what they sell on. But you go, well, wait a minute. I need return for the whole time that I'm investing. I don't need it just for the most recent period in time. And you go, why was the return so low? Well, because of something called tactical asset allocation, which is changing around the funds inside the portfolio, which I described as turnover of the funds in the funds. Then you got turnover inside the portfolio. And what we know from research, as I've talked about on this show for over 20 years, those two things, which are often thought of as investment management, that's what you do when you manage a portfolio. You do that. You figure out which areas of the market to be in and all. And then it brings me back to my original point, which, if you remember, my original point was I go to my 401k meeting and I see a name that I'm familiar with and I am comfortable with that. And I go, oh, well, they're a big name. They couldn't be in business for as long as they have been without being really great at managing money and doing all the right things with my money. And to which I would answer, not necessarily. Don't go and turn a blind eye because you may not be getting what you necessarily expect. And, and I said, well, I mentioned Fidelity right there. I said, well, American funds, they have funds that are the same thing, Target 2040 funds. And if you pull up one of their funds and you go, well, let's go through the same exercise. Well, you got Microsoft is owned by, let's see, Investment Company of America, Washington, Mutual, AMCAP Fund, the Growth Fund, the Fundamental Investors, New Economy Fund, New Perspective Fund, American Balance, American Mutual, Capital World Growth and Income Fund, New World Fund, Global Insight, Global Balance Fund, Capital Income Builder, Income Fund of America. Those are all mutual funds that I just named off, all of them owning Microsoft stock according to Morningstar when you do an overlap analysis. Broadcom, I'm not going to go through the list again. I don't want to bore you. But if you look at the list and it's that long, it's, let's see, held by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 mutual funds. 15 mutual funds in that mutual fund own Broadcom. And then Philip Morris, you see the same thing. United Healthcare, it's not quite 15. It looks like about 12. But it's a pretty good high number. So you look at that and go, well, wait a minute, what is going on here? How did they choose these mutual funds? They apparently did not choose them because who put the mutual funds inside the fund together? The same company. They should know what is inside their own mutual funds. They should know that they are doing this and they're engaging in this activity of buying lots of different funds that own the same exact stocks. And you go, well, how's this possible? What is going on here? And I don't know. It's a good question. I actually had a meeting one time, and a financial advisor, it was really awkward. Oh my goodness, really awkward. This guy is wanting to meet with me and talk with me, and he brings in his financial advisor. You talk about an awkward meeting. I was like, well, wait a minute. You're here. You must be here because you don't have confidence in this person. And this is what I want to say. You don't have confidence in this person that you're working with. That must be the reason you're here, right? That has to be it. And yet, you want your person to hear what do you want me to train your person? I'm not sure exactly what's going on here. I've done a lot of advisor training. Matter of fact, I was actually signed up to go through a doctoral program. It was about 4 years ago. And a friend of mine goes, Paul, you don't want to do that. And I said, well, why don't I want to do that? And he goes, well, why do you want to do it? And I said, well, I'd like to train financial advisors. He goes, they'll never learn. Don't bother. And it was funny because I did literally this in front of the advisor. I walked them through this process. You know what they did? You know what change they made? I think you can hear from the sarcasm in my voice. None. They made no changes whatsoever. I don't know how on earth the client ever came to the conclusion that not changing and doing something different wasn't a good idea based on this, but somehow it didn't cross his mind to make any changes. So in effect, you look at this and go, what on earth is going on? And I cannot, for the life of me, answer your question. I want to diversify. If I've got target date 2040, I'm not going to retire for quite a while, right? If I own this mutual fund, so what is the mix of assets? Well, 2/3 of it is U.S. stocks. 1/3 of it's international. Well, that's only one country in the entire world that I've got 2/3 of the money in. And that's the country where, we're worried about the dollar devaluing and, a lot of things like that. And you go, well, some people are worried about that. I go, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? But if you happen to be that's something that you're worried about, wouldn't you maybe want to not be diversified or just concentrated it all in one country? Maybe you want to be diversified amongst a lot more countries, maybe. And then you look at large companies versus small companies, and you know that 83% of 20-year periods, small companies have a higher return than large companies. And growth companies, 96% of the time, have a lower return than value. Value has a higher return than growth, other way of saying that, 96% of 20-year periods in history, right? Heard me say that before. Well, with that, we'd say, hey, maybe I want to have a little bit more I want to have some small company exposure here, right? Well over 90% of the money in this fund is sitting in big companies. I mean, there's very little money actually in small companies in this portfolio, less than 1% in microcap stocks, real small companies. And you look at the asset mix, the style box, where it tells you what area of the market predominantly they're in, large blend and large growth. If you look at the past 10 years, it's those two style boxes, large blend, large growth. And where do we expect the least return long run would be, yes, large blend, large growth, right? So hence you see the problem over and over. And yet companies like this, and I don't mean to pick on just these two companies, Fidelity, American Funds, but my point being is that so often you as an investor will gravitate to a name because you're familiar with the name and you think they can't be this big unless they're really great. To which I would answer, no, there's a lot of marketing and there's a lot of freedom to do whatever you want to do in this industry because everybody's kind of doing the same thing and there's safety in numbers. If all these big mutual fund companies and investment companies are messing up in the same way and everybody's doing it, then the investor sits there and goes, well, 6 of one, half dozen the other. Which one do I go to? I don't know. And this is why, again, I think it is so critical as an investor that you don't just turn a blind eye, that you start to understand these things so that hence you're not part of this whole mess that we call the investing world, and you're not subject to the crazy activities that they engage in.